Hello and welcome to this video. I just finished painting my latest army. I thought I would show it off and briefly discuss its wider place within my collection. This is my Black Templars army. It's always great to have a finished army, and this is a little under 5,000 points, composed of about 126 painted models. This is my first fully painted Space Marine force, I think, in about 20 years. I completed this army mostly this year, and with a lot of emphasis in the last 3 months. Started playing Space Marines at the transition between 2nd and 3rd edition, somewhere around 1997, 1998. The first game I ever played was with Blood Angels, and I played a lot of games with generic Space Marines for a while. But then when in 2000 the Codex Armageddon came out, I really fell in love with Black Templar. I liked their rules. I took them to several local tournaments and national events as well. They were my really first true love in Warhammer 40k, but I ended up selling them in the early 2000s, and I've really regretted that decision ever since. I did retain some of my early characters and a few bits and pieces, but most of the collection was sold. Now, the rules for this faction have always been a little spotty, right? They had that full-fledged codex, and well, it was actually a codex supplement in 2000. Then they had a full-fledged codex in 2005 with a few kind of fine cast releases. And then they really dropped off the map until 2019 when they had some new rules in Psychic Awakening, Faith and Fury. And so I was really excited when they had a full codex supplement and a kind of a new line of models in 2021. I wanted to recreate my old army, and so I jumped on board and invested fairly heavily. I had an army list in mind, but I went above and beyond that to buy a few extra things for nostalgic reasons, looking back at my old Templar, and also to provide a little bit of extra tactical breadth. Hopefully I can get it on the table to play a few games in the near future. I have 2 armies that I want to play heavily this year, Kin of Nurgle for Age of Sigmar and Black Templars for 40k. Both have that kind of universal 5+ ward save. And I can channel a lot of different psychographic profiles, but I tend to prefer my playstyle to kind of slow, resilient, dependable force. But I don't currently play a lot of 40k, and so if it immediately becomes apparent that my Templar army needs some desperate reinforcements, I'll do that as necessary. But right now it's a very heavy infantry force, and I went for something that is both for the gaming style, but also because the Templars are the largest Space Marine chapter, so I thought it was appropriate to have a lot of soldiers on foot. Most of the collection is composed of dedicated Templars units, but I've added a few from the generic Space Marine range, if the aesthetics, or if they match, or if they can further kind of bolster the resilience of that horde of Templar. So I have both the old and new High Marshal Helbrecht, both the old and new version of Chaplain Grimaldus. I added a Primaris Bladeguard Ancient, the Marshal, a Castellan, a Judicar, a Chaplain on bike, which is obviously a great unit, the Chaplain on foot. Black Templar should have plenty of those in general, has a very religiously devout kind of chapter, and an Apothecary as well, to just give it that extra little bit of resilience. I painted 3 of the standard Emperor's Champion models. That includes the old 25th anniversary model. I think that's the first purchase I ever made online. I remember having to ask, rather sheepishly, ask my dad for his credit card at the time, because I didn't have one. I was too young. And I don't know, so that's just kind of a weird little memory for me. But the metal version of the Champion, and kind of the newest version as well. Although my original Templar infantry are long since gone, I do have plenty of older Space Marine models within other Space Marine collections, so I moved about 20 of those over into this new Templar force and customized them with some of the older Templar bits for the old Astartes line. And that created basically 2 10-man of the old version of the Crusader squads. And then I added a few of the old scout models as neophytes. That's basically what they used to count as back in the day. And one of the squads is ranged, it's kind of ranged base of melted weapons, and the other is melee armed with power fists. I have a unit of 5 Astartes Sword Brethren. This is the old Finecast unit. And then from the new range of models released last year, I have 60 of the new Primaris Crusader Marines. These are arranged in large 20-man units, 2 of which are armed for melee combat with a total of 8 Power Fists, and 1 is equipped with for range with 4 Pyre Blasters. Initially, I was only going to go for the melee units. I think that's what my focus will be in the army list, but I just wanted to have a really good range of models in this army, and so I bought kind of the fire support unit as well, which I think could be useful. Not part of my proposed army list, but I wanted to add a unit of the Primaris Sword Brethren. Again, this is kind of a luxury purchase. I think compared to some other options, they're not ideal, but I just think they're so cool. I wanted them part of my army. I equipped them all with power weapons. Again, likely far from ideal, but from a gaming perspective, but I thought it was cool. And they are called Sword Brethren, and so equipping them with swords just seemed right to me. I added a unit of Primaris Blade Guard Veterans. These are a great unit and perfectly fit the Templar aesthetic. I thought I needed some more kind of fire support units, so I added 2 Primaris Redemptive Dreadnoughts with macro plasma cannons and Gatling cannons. I added an Impulsor with the multi-melta gun and missiles to transport that Blade Guard unit. My old Templar army list was a pretty cohesive small force crammed into 2 Land Raider Crusaders that would just charge up the field and unload a bunch of Black Templar right in the middle of the enemy army. I really wanted to buy 2, but they're expensive, and it's really hard to invest at this point in the old Astartes line because they have to be, I don't know how much longer they're going to be supported. It's always kind of in the back of my mind, and it's not something I would necessarily bring to a modern game. So buying 2 seemed a little outrageous given their current price still, but I did justify buying 1. These are expensive kits, and I upgraded them with the old Black Templar doors upgrade too, so a little extra special there. Still to be painted. I have a few odds and ends. They need to be stripped and kind of worked on. I'm not going to prioritize that in the near term, but I do have a Terminator Chaplain, some of the old school Terminators on the 28mm. I have one of the Emperor's Champion models from the 3rd edition box set, kind of a lesser known model. And that was heavily converted back when I was playing. This is from my original army, and so I'm trying to figure out if I can basically convert it back to as close to the original sculpt as I can. These are all missing some parts and will need to be worked on, but I'll get to them at some point in the future. And that's the army. I think it's now my single largest Space Marine army. I'm so happy to have that back in my collection. I totally understand why some people think the Black Templar are a little cringy. It's pure role-playing for me. I don't obviously identify with the religious zeal that these guys are promoting, but I think they're such a cool aesthetic, and I think they're such an interesting, brutal army to play on the battlefield. So I'll be building some models over the next couple days and diving into my next project. After working on Templar, my first true 40k love, I thought it was only appropriate to revisit my first fantasy army, so I'll be working on Beasts of Chaos next.